Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Abby Beho. I am the founder and program director of Lake Health and Wellbeing, and we are a public health NGO based in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we aim to improve the health and well-being of our local, regional, and online communities. So tonight we've teamed up with the Nevis Department of Gender Affairs for this regional panel discussion, on endometriosis, and it's in line with the theme for International Women's Day. And so the theme for this webinar is Accelerate Action on Endometriosis. So this session is actually a part of a series of discussions that we're having monthly here in St. Kitts and Nevis in collaboration with the Department of Gender Affairs on menstrual health. And as it's March and being Endometriosis Awareness Month, we decided to focus this session on endometriosis. So welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Please feel free to add comments in the chat. Feel free, as you have questions that come to mind during the session, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them at some point during the event or during the Q&A section. So what we're going to be doing for this session is that it's going to be in like two components. We're going to start with some short remarks from representatives from the Nevis Department of Gender Affairs, and also their counterpart in Trinidad and Tobago. And then straight after that, we'll move straight into the regional panel discussion featuring the lovely ladies that you see on your screen right now. So just a reminder, if you could turn off your mic so that we don't have any disruptions during the session. Also, this session is being recorded so that we can send it to you after the event so that you can sort of refer to it later. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is Saros Hendrickson. Saros is the Director of the Department of Gender Affairs in Nevis. So over to you, Saros.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us here today. We are so excited to have this discussion happening, and we really do hope that we're able to identify some next steps to this discussion. As Abby did say, that this is a part of our monthly series on menstrual health, and we reached out to a number of regional advocates who are here to be a part of this panel discussion. So we're so excited. We are here to recognize the Endometriosis Awareness Month, and I've noticed in my research that endometriosis is not just a gynecological condition, but it's a whole body condition where there are cases where you're finding endometrial-like tissues in the lungs, and this is absolutely alarming. And what we realize is that it is often underdiagnosed and misunderstood. So today we're gathered to raise awareness, share our information, and empower those who live with endometriosis along with their families and their communities. Our goal at the Department of Gender Affairs Nevis is to bring attention to the challenges faced by these women who are suffering, and I use that word suffering, from endometriosis, whether it's the physical pain, the emotional toll, or the barriers to diagnosis and treatment. And by coming together, this is absolutely important. By coming together, we create a space for education, support, and advocacy so that one day, and I hope very soon, no one would have to suffer in silence. One of the key drivers I've mentioned earlier is the work done by the NGOs that are represented here. And we realize that they are continually increasing awareness and creating real impact to those living with endometriosis. And these incredible NGOs around the Caribbean region, they're doing exceptional work, and I extend additional kudos to you. You recognize that there is a vital attention that's needed for this condition that many women face in the Caribbean. And I think we can assume that it's probably thousands of women that are affected with endometriosis. And we know that if the female body is affected, if the female is affected, her household is affected, her workspace is affected, and all those systems that she's a part of ultimately becomes affected because she cannot produce or be productive as well as she should be. So I thank you for that, for breaking that silence and for ensuring that endometriosis gets the attention. So my hope here is that we continue to work together, we continue to collaborate, we continue to lend our voices and our expertise everywhere we are, whether it's on a webinar, in our workspaces, in our communities, to not just bring attention, but ensure that those that are suffering, they receive the patient care and the much needed information that's required for them to have that quality of life. Thank you, Abby.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Hendrickson, for your remarks. And we just really appreciate all your support. Ms. Hendrickson has been such a wonderful support to all the work that we're doing around women's health. And so we really appreciate your support and for being here today. So the next speaker that we have is Ms. Shelley-Ann Hart, who is the director of, the Gender Affairs Bureau in Trinidad and Tobago. So over to you, Ms. Hart.
Pleasant good afternoon to our host, Ms. Abby Beho, to Ms. Sarah Hendrickson, Director of Nevis Department of Gender, and I must say thank you for the invitation, representative of government bodies from across the region, panelists, colleagues in the gender affairs field, medical fields, etc., and members and staff of the division or the Department of Gender Affairs, Nevis Island Administration, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. A pleasant good evening to you all. I take the opportunity to wish you all, ladies logged on here today, a happy International Women's Month, because we know we need more than a day to celebrate greatness. So on the heels of International Women's Day, which was observed on March the 8th, many of us would have been tuned into mainstream discussions linked to gender equality and equity. However, as we continue to raise awareness and stand in solidarity, this also gives us an opportunity to serve our populations by addressing lesser voice issues. Women's reproductive health, and more specifically, the lack of focus on developing solutions and treatment for health concerns which are specific to women and girls, has for too long negatively impacted our productive capacity. The health challenges constitute a barrier to women and girls' equality and the full enjoyment of our fundamental rights and freedom. In recent times, there has been increased focus on women and girls' reproductive health regarding menstruation and menopause. So today's events, we focus our lens on another critical issue, which is endometriosis. This evening, we are all participating in this discussion, not only as representatives of our respective offices, but as advocates for effectively addressing this reproductive health concern of all women and girls across the region. As women, we are privy to her stories, such as challenges with menstruation and other issues, including menopause, into the workplace. So today, we bring endometriosis and its effects on women and girls' lives into focus. It is encouraged that this forum has been convened to identify best practices for diagnosis, treatment, and support, and to facilitate regional collaboration to the development of the issue. Ladies and gents, we know endometriosis is more than a reproductive health issue, but a complex systematic condition that is also known as the invisible condition. The challenges faced by women and girls living with endometriosis are far-reaching, not only in terms of their physical health, but also mental, emotional, and the social spheres. Trinidad and Tobago, as part of the national gender machinery of the Caribbean region, remains committed to strengthening collaboration across the region, internationally, and at home. We recognize that as small island states, there is more strength in our collective voices than there is in individual efforts. And we have a responsibility to use this collective voice to advocate for better healthcare and outcomes for our women and girls. The Gender Affairs Division, Office of the Prime Minister for the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, continues to strengthen its nationwide capacity for addressing gender issues. In so doing, we call for a multi-stakeholder approach to holistically addressing these concerns, along with capacity building in health, education, policy, not only here in Trinidad, but in our fellow Caribbean islands. As Caribbean society, we must move beyond the stigma that often surrounds women's health issues. We must create spaces where women and girls feel safe, supported, empowered to seek help when experiencing these symptoms. I know some persons might think, what does International Women's Day, gender equality, and endometriosis have to do with each other? How are they linked? They are linked through the commemoration of International Women's Day and other observations such as these, it reminds us to empower all our women and girls and to promote just treatment by removing gender gaps and biases. Trinidad and Tobago is accelerating action in areas of need, encompassing concerns of key populations, minority groups, and vulnerabilities in society. I urge you, our counterparts across the region, to consider the same, and I call for a unification of all sectors of society towards achieving full protection of one's human rights. May we continue to push forward and accelerate action through collaborative approaches for the protection and care of Caribbean women and girls. Sensitization will reduce the need for us to hush up when experiencing chronic period pain, pelvic pain, sexual pain, etc., so that the conversation about reproductive health do not remain taboo. May we see the day that stigma and the lack of understanding about the effect on intimate relationships, fertility, and the ability to function properly at work and school or home are no longer possible. May we be supported in understanding our bodies while seeking timely and accurate diagnosis, effective treatments, and adopting a healthier lifestyle. Additionally, that we engage men and boys to also understand the issues under endometriosis and how this condition affects their loved ones and how they can provide support. As we honor the International Women's Day theme for all women and girls, rights, equality, and empowerment, may we work together for the advancement of all those who are treated unfairly. I encourage you to continue to support one another as we work together to promote the best interests of all women, men, girls, and boys in a world free of stigma and discrimination with respect for all bodies. As I close, I encourage all of us to love the bodies we're in. Let us all work together to create a visible option or visible focus about this invisible condition, endometriosis, so that the specific needs of women and girls can be validated, respected, protected, and supported. I thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Hart, for your remarks. And it's really great to get your insights and to learn more about your views and what Trinidad and Tobago is doing to address some of these issues, and also to highlight the fact that we do need to really get rid of the stigma and have a holistic approach. So thank you so much for your remarks. So we're now going to swiftly move into our panel discussion. So I am going to invite our panelists to come onto the virtual stage. So first we have Julia Mandeville, who's the co-founder of the Barbados Association of Endometriosis and PCOS. We have Odelia Thomas, who's the founder and director of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Association of Endometriosis, Adenomyosis, and PCOS. A nice mouthful. And then we also have Madixia Broomes, the vice president of the Trinidad and Tobago Endometriosis Association. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for joining us. So I will bring them all up, as well as myself. Great. So first of all, we'll just get you all to introduce yourselves. So if you just tell us a little bit about who you are, tell us about your organization and the work that you do. So we'll start with Julia. Over to Julia.
Thank you so much, Abby. Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Mandeville. I am the co-founder of the Barbados Association of Endometriosis and PCOS. The organization was established in 2016 by a group of like-minded individuals who either had been diagnosed with endometriosis and or PCOS, or treated people. So we also have healthcare professionals as part of our founding committee, simply because we recognize that there was a gap in understanding and a gap in infrastructure to really adequately support persons in Barbados with these conditions. And so our organization focuses a lot on advocacy, support, and research to, again, better support those of us in Barbados with the conditions, as well as those persons who may not necessarily have had a diagnosis as yet, but the goal is to have information and infrastructure developed in such a way that it makes their journeys a bit easier in the future. So just happy to be here and happy to spend this time with everyone to talk about potential solutions moving forward in addressing endometriosis in the region. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julia. So Odelia, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Odelia Thomas, and I am from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I'm the founder of long name, St. Vincent and the Grenadines Association of Endometriosis, Adenomyosis, and PCOS. It came out of my dream to raise awareness on these conditions after being diagnosed with all of them and fibroids, and having never even heard the word endometriosis before, although I would have been experiencing symptoms from the age of 11. So our main goal is to educate, raise awareness, and empower women to take charge of their health and to understand their bodies and have information that could help them to feel better or help to guide them in the right direction in feeling better. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Odelia. And then over to you, Madixia, to introduce yourself and to tell us a bit about your organization. Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
Good evening to all. Thank you for having us. I am Madixia Broomes, and I represent the Trinidad and Tobago Endometriosis Association, fondly called TTEA. And we've been in existence since 2012. Our founder, and I would say it was her brainchild, that is Mrs. Abisha Toussaint. She would have been the real pilot, pushed by God, I should say, because she has so much energy to do it. But she was really the driving force to establish this organization so that we can provide the necessary support to women and girls and their families who are experiencing these symptoms, because we recognize that it is not a disease that affects only the women and girls, but it affects every aspect of society, because women and girls contribute to every aspect of society. And we provide literature, we provide education, we provide a listening ear through our EndoTT group, and we provide the necessary support. We may not be able to financially support, but we can promote and support others who would have needs for financial aid, etc. Now, why we are here this evening? Well, we want to join with our counterparts in moving the agenda forward, past just being support systems, but getting persons who have the wherewithal to be able to understand the importance of doing, and making sure that the necessary legislature is championed on our behalf to the needed cabinets for their approval.
Wonderful.
So,
thank you so much.
Wonderful to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sorry to cut you off. Thank you so much for introducing yourselves, all of you. So to get started, I mean, one of the things Odelia said was she was diagnosed with endometriosis and she'd never even heard the word before. I think Ms. Hendrickson would have mentioned that, endometriosis is a very complex condition. So to make sure that we're all on the same page and that everybody in the room understands what endometriosis is, I wonder, Odelia, if you could just, in the simplest, maybe layman's terms, explain what endometriosis is for us.
Okay, so endometriosis, or endo for short, is a chronic inflammatory disease where tissue that is similar to the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, bearing in mind the word similar to, it is not the endometrium, but tissue that is similar to it grows on organs and structures outside of the uterus. And it forms cysts, adhesions, lesions, nodules on places where they should not. So this can lead to, again, inflammation, bleeding, scar tissue, and damage to organs. And depending on where your endometriosis is growing, it can have different symptoms. So it varies from woman to woman, but the main symptom that often triggers a woman to think, okay, something isn't right, is pain. Chronic pain, chronic pelvic pain, pain with sex, pain during sex, after sex, pain when urinating, pain when defecating, just pain. That is like the baseline for most women. Some women wouldn't have any symptoms at all until maybe they try to get pregnant and it's not happening. So that's a signal for some women. But for many women, pain is their baseline symptom. Other symptoms can include fatigue. Like you just feel tired all of the time. And no matter how much sleep you get, doesn't help. You're just exhausted. Digestive issues, and that again depends on where your endo is growing. So for example, you have endo in your bowel, on your bowels, you might have digestive issues. So that could be anything from vomiting, diarrhea, what is the word for when you're not able to go off? Constipation, right? That's what I'm. Yes, constipation, nausea. Maybe you have endo on your diaphragm. You could be coughing up blood. Your lungs could be collapsing. And the endo has been found in the brain. It grows anywhere outside of the uterus. And so it's not since I've been reading, I've been seeing things like, oh, it used to be considered a white woman's disease or a working woman's disease. Endo affects everybody. It has no face. It has no, okay, I'm going to choose Julia and leave Odelia alone. No. It affects 10% of women worldwide. And if we look at the population of the world, that's over 190 million people in this entire world. There is no cure for it. So having a hysterectomy isn't going to cure it. Having a baby isn't going to cure it. There is no cure for this disease. I think I covered the basics of it. If I'm leaving out anything, Julia or Madixia, anybody, you can just jump in here.
Yeah. So Julia, Madixia, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, no, you did a really good job, Odelia. I just want to add on to that. There's also this notion that endometriosis only mainly affects people when they start menarche, and then it will magically stop when you're entering menopause. That is not the case. It has been found in children before menarche, and what has been identified as that signal that that's endometriosis, particularly for young girls, is chronic pelvic pain. And likewise, endometriosis, because it doesn't necessarily only affect your reproductive system, as Odelia said, it can be found anywhere in the body. So even if you go through menopause, and you've stopped menstruating and you're not having a period or cycle, that doesn't necessarily mean the impact of endometriosis is gone. Because it could be, again, you could have thoracic endometriosis, you could have endometriosis on your bladder, on your bowels. And so it is very widespread, it is very all-encompassing. And then to Odelia's point of the 190 women globally, it's important for us to note that most of that research has been done in populations not representative of us in the Caribbean. So the caveat is that is typically non-Hispanic white women. And so we don't even know what it looks like right now currently within the African diaspora. And so that's something we really need to have a conversation about. But yeah, just add on to what Odelia said.
Wonderful. And we'll come back to research in the Caribbean in a later question. But Madixia, would you like to add anything about, what is endometriosis? Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
It's not a myth. First thing. What women experience is real. And most of the time, what happens is that persons start experiencing these symptoms from a young age, and they are not validated. And that is where we need to start in terms of identifying the symptoms from as early as possible. So when they start with the chronic pelvic pains and they're identifying them, that pain, persons need to start listening up, paying closer attention, having a higher sensitivity to understanding what is really happening to these young girls. So I think it's about covered.
Wonderful. All right, thank you so much. And I think that was a really strong point. So we might actually just start with that point. So what could we do to make sure that there are no delays in diagnosis when it comes to endometriosis? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about in terms of healthcare providers, doctors, women ourselves? What can be done to ensure that we can diagnose earlier so that women can get sort of the management earlier? So maybe we start again with Odelia.
Okay. So the delay in diagnosis, again, going back to my reading when I first got diagnosed, they said anywhere from 8 to 10 years is a delay in diagnosis. But as Julia said, this research is being done on non-Hispanic white women. Now, in the Caribbean, where we have very few resources, that delay in diagnosis is much longer. I can use myself as an example. It took me 21 years from my first symptoms to get a diagnosis. Wow. And I know so many women who it has taken them much longer than that in order for them to get a diagnosis. So the delay in diagnosis, what can we do? First, we need to be educated on what is happening to our bodies. Recognize that something is happening. For too often, as women, we are being told that pain is normal. Experiencing pain is normal. It's a woman's lot in life. From Eve come down, it's normal. It is not. We need to just take that out of our vocabulary. It is not normal. The type of pain that a woman with endometriosis goes through, it is not normal. A pain where sometimes you can't leave your bed, sometimes you end up in the ER, sometimes you have to get injectable pain medication. That it's not normal. So we need to start with that. Stop normalizing pain for women, especially a woman who is having her period, a woman who is not even on her period, but experiencing severe pelvic pain. We need to start with that. Let's stop normalizing that the pain is normal. We also need for women to understand their bodies. You should know when something out of the ordinary is happening to you. We also need to know as women our medical history, not just ours, but our immediate family members. Because there's when you have an immediate family member, like a mother or sister who had endo, it is more likely that you will have it as well. Does not equal that you will get it, but it is more likely that you will have it. So we need to know our family histories and our own medical histories. We need to educate ourselves on what illnesses could be causing this. Is it fibroids? What is it? We need to go to a doctor. And if you've ever heard me speaking before, you will know I love to say, you are the CEO of your body. If you're going to a doctor who is not giving you answers, who is dismissive of you, who is dismissive of your concerns, find another doctor. That's your money. So if this doctor is not taking you seriously, move right along. Find a doctor who will listen to you. Shop doctors. Not all doctors are created equal. Not all doctors know what endo is. Some still believe that it is not a condition that affects Black women. Often, some still have all these outdated notions in their mind, and times are changing. Research is showing new information. So if the doctor doesn't have any idea about what endo is, about what it does to a woman, then you need to find a different doctor. We need doctors in the Caribbean who are trained in recognizing endo in all of its forms, who are trained in doing excision surgery, and we need other providers who work along with these doctors, because we need pelvic floor physiotherapists. We need pain management doctors. There are so many other categories of medical providers that we need in the Caribbean that, other than the excision specialists, they are needed, but they cannot work alone, because depending on where the endo is located you're going to need other specialists to work with this doctor. We need funding because these surgeries are not cheap and they are not free. We need funding for research because we need to know, what does endo look like in the Caribbean? How many of us in the Caribbean are suffering with this disease? Does it present the same in a Caribbean woman as it presents in a non-Hispanic white woman? So those are some of the things coming to the top of my head that I think is needed for us to move forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. And in terms of what can be done to ensure that we could diagnose endometriosis quickly and ensure early diagnosis or earlier diagnosis.
Oh, sorry,
So
go ahead.
Again, I'll just be adding on to what Odelia said because everything she said, I've wholeheartedly agreed with. But additionally, I think we also need to, whilst we recognize endometriosis does impact reproductive health, is associated with fertility issues, there is this persistent belief that that is the only thing we need to care about when it comes to women and endometriosis and not the pain and the other symptoms that affect everyday life. And so there needs to be some type of change in our thinking around endometriosis and women's health and fertility, where we recognize pain as valid, as Madixia had said. And also there's the pain, there's the normalization, but there's also the pain minimization. You know, everybody has a period, why are you so special? Something like that, where it's minimizing your pain. We need to have community education about stigma around menstrual health, stigma around infertility, because if people with endometriosis, as a lot of them do, recognize its association with infertility, they feel stigmatized, they feel silenced, they don't want to talk about it because for a lot of people, womanhood is equal to motherhood. And if you are not able to become a mother naturally, what does that mean to your womanhood? And that creates a very vicious cycle of stigma. And so it really is important for us to educate people about women as autonomous beings, whether or not they're going to become mothers. That like being a mother, it's great. A lot of people do aspire to be mothers. However, womanhood does not necessarily equate to motherhood. And I feel like recognizing that and teaching more about endometriosis as a whole body condition and not solely as a menstrual condition or a condition that affects fertility is something we need to be really intentional about in order to improve outcomes for persons with endometriosis, both physical outcomes as well as mental health and psychological outcomes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Looks like Madixia, you wanted to jump in. So anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I have to agree with everything that Julia and Odelia just said. And I have to add that there's an economic aspect of it all because we have our population of productive women unable to produce. And these are professionals. These are persons who can add to the GDP of any country. And in so doing, they will be able to build the financial status of the country. However, when these women are suffering endometriosis, they cannot do that. They don't have the ability to do it because they don't have access to the necessary support and care to help them to be productive. So they are always searching. Most of the time, they are searching for help. Whereas if we had the support and the help readily available to them at an earlier stage where their symptoms do not overwhelm them as much as it is now, because we have to be realistic. A lot of the women who have endometriosis now are coping with symptoms that the ordinary person, the ordinary woman, don't have a clue about. And that's what we have to understand. So when it becomes overwhelming to them, because we're not talking about the ordinary person coping mechanism. We're talking about the person who has learned to live with endometriosis. So when they become overwhelmed, they are unable to produce. So they are mothers. They are breadwinners. And if they are unable to produce, it means that children don't have access to care from mother, husbands. Look at the family dynamics there. Families could break up as a result. We have the home now not being able to financially maintain itself, so it's dependent on social financial aid. And that is what we would want to not have. We want to have a system that allows for the woman to heal, allows for the woman to access care at an early stage, and not have to be searching for avenues to get it, to get the finances. Because most of the time, if they can access the finances early on to do the surgeries or the therapies that will help reduce the symptoms, sometimes they don't have a cure, but they can have a better quality of life and become producers. And if we can have that done at an earlier time, and the quality of the work that is being done for them would be of such a quality that they could now be able to access this type of care earlier on, the outcomes are going to be better, and they're going to be productive. They're going to have more productive families. Their children will be well cared for, so they too will become productive citizens in the future. And we have to look at the ripple effect that this disease is having on our population. The economic, that socio-economic factor is very, very important.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think you've eased us nicely into the next kind of topic, which is how endometriosis impacts women's daily lives. And I think you've kind of clearly sort of given us a nice overview of that. So I'm actually just going to ask Julia if you'd like to add anything in terms of how endometriosis impacts women's daily lives, their physical health, which you kind of covered with the symptoms, mental health, and just overall quality of life. So what are you seeing in Barbados?
So in terms of the day-to-day, it is typically the struggle for people with endometriosis. Again, it's a condition that is characterized by pain, cyclic pain, not necessarily associated with menstruation for everyone. And so there's a chronic pain, again, as Madixia said, then that affects your productivity. There's also the fatigue. You are always tired. That fatigue with endometriosis is indescribable. And again, no amount of sleep can really address it adequately. And so those two by themselves already are very debilitating and incapacitating. And then on top of that, now you have the social aspect of it, where you have persons who do not understand the condition, understand how you are always tired. How are you always in pain? You were just in pain yesterday. And then that leads to you, feeling guilty, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, the whole gamut of negative emotions typically. And then that can lead to social isolation. And I feel like most of us went through something called the COVID-19 pandemic, where we understood how being isolated could really impact your psychosocial well-being. But that is something that a lot of people with endometriosis have been experiencing prior to a pandemic and post a pandemic, because they are seen as quote unquote the flaky friend, because the pain, it comes in spurts, so you have flares, and so you would have made plans. However, you have a bout of pain or something else happens, and now you have to cancel on those plans. And that can be very frustrating for persons on the outside looking in. But my thing is, imagine how it is for the person experiencing the symptoms of the condition, as well as being unable to be sociable with their friends and family. And then there's the intimate partner aspect of it. As Odelia mentioned, you have pain with sex. And so if you are in a relationship where you are in a committed relationship, especially, and there's that expectation that you are in a situation where the pain is just too much, then that can lead potentially to the breakdown in the relationship. And that is not hyperbole. That has happened to several people in Barbados that I have engaged with during this work. And so it really, really is important to, while we're educating the women, we also need to educate men and male partners because it's important for them to understand that this pain is not something that we can control. This pain is not something that we cause. We just need to be able to have the supports to navigate it. And so working with a multidisciplinary team, as Odelia was alluding to, like a pelvic health physiotherapist, um, psychiatrist, psychologist, a whole team to help you navigate these outcomes in terms of your mental health outcomes or your mental and your physical outcomes, sorry, is really, really critical to getting the best possible outcomes in addition to, the typical OBGYN and GP. But really and truly, that psychosocial aspect really does have a huge part to play in the quality of life that persons with endometriosis have.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. It's really quite sad to see the overall impact that endometriosis can have on a woman, and a lot of it is not necessarily, it can be societal, which is kind of the frustrating part, that lack of empathy. So Odelia, I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add in terms of how endometriosis affects a woman's quality of life, and then what I'll do is I'll go to the chat and just see if we have any questions and before we move on.
Sorry, forgot I was muted. In terms of quality of life, Judah talked about intimate relationships, and she had mentioned earlier about in the Caribbean, womanhood is often equated to motherhood. And I just wanted to expand on that a little bit because too often we make women feel that their worth is tied up in their ability to have a child or multiple children. And so when you're not able to have one, it's not just it causes a friction with your intimate partner. When you come from a very small country like I do, the whole community gets involved in your business. And so you would hear things like, you ain't giving your mother no grandchildren. When you're going to make a baby, you find again, the whole community gets involved and everybody starts chit-chatting behind your back, in front of your face. Caribbean people just don't care. And so having to hear this often, over and over, especially as a woman who is probably experiencing fertility issues, can really affect your mental health. And maybe I want to have a baby for myself. Suppose I want that and I'm not able to. I'm already struggling mentally and emotionally. And then all this chitter-chatter is just making it worse for me. You're making me feel really bad about myself. You're making me feel less than a woman. You're making me feel so unhappy. And so as Julia said, it's not, and Madixia, it's not just, we have to involve the community in this conversation. We have to involve the partners. We have to involve the friends. Because sometimes we make plans to go out and I didn't plan to have pain, but it happens. I can't control what is happening to my body. And so it comes as if, so every time we plan to go out, you're not coming? Is it that you're willfully using your endo as an excuse? And so that can affect your personal relationships, your friendships. And that leaves a woman now with minimal social support. And support is something that you need with endo. It's an isolating disease, but it is a disease that you really need the support of the people that you love to sort of hold you up and to remind you that you are okay and, just to keep repeating to you, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
You're still a woman. You're still loved. You're still valued. And somebody who could come over and, okay, I haven't seen you in a few days. I'm going to come over and we'll just chat. Or I'll just come and watch some Netflix with you. Or if you're feeling good, okay, so today's a good day for you. Let's go out. We may not be able to plan in advance, but we can. If you're feeling good today, let's do something today.
Yeah, definitely we need that kind of whole co-community support to get behind women that are affected by endometriosis. So there's like 2 questions in the chat, so I'm going to put them to you. So the first question is, what is the age range that is typical that endometriosis typically presents itself? And I think someone kind of covered it earlier. So I don't know, Julia, do you want to take that? I see you nodding. Julia, do you want to take that?
So typically, uh, and historically, it has been usually diagnosed in women and girls from like 13 and older. But as Odelia said, you have delays in diagnosis, and delays typically are very frequent in the Black population, and so that represents most of the Caribbean. But it has been found in girls as young as 7. And so it can range, but it's typically, especially if you are in a space where you're to have a baby and get pregnant now, and you're having that issue getting pregnant. That is usually when, and that's why I made that mention before of it's important not to equate womanhood and motherhood, because that is one of the issues that we have. So that's my story actually, where I was having pain for 15 years. And it was only after I got married. Still the same amount of pain, but it was now, oh, you're in a relationship, you're having unprotected sex, and you're still not getting pregnant. I think you have endometriosis. Meanwhile, the only thing that was changed was me being married to my husband and now having unprotected sex. But I was still having the same symptoms. And so I got diagnosed in my mid-20s. And that is typical. But it can range depending on how um, skilled the doctor is and how intentional the doctor is in really evaluating the symptoms you present with. You can be diagnosed earlier. There are people in Barbados that have been diagnosed around 15, 16. And so it really does range, but usually in the mid-20s is what we tend to see. And this is years after dealing with a lot of pain. And I also see a question about a child in vitro. So there have been studies that have shown that there have been some fetuses that have been found with endo.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And there's one more question I'll take before we move on with our conversation. So someone is asking if someone has had a hysterectomy because of endometriosis, can they still have endometrial tissue elsewhere? Yes.
Yes.
So Odelia, they're all nodding.
Yes,
So I don't know
yes,
if anyone else
yes.
to say anything. They're all nodding. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Endo does not affect your inside of your uterus. So it is a myth that having a hysterectomy is going to cure you of endo. There is no cure. And I'm speaking as a woman who had a hysterectomy because I had adenomyosis as well. And a hysterectomy is a cure for adenomyosis. I still have endo. I have bowel endo. So you can imagine the symptoms that I have. No, so you can have a hysterectomy and still have endo because a hysterectomy is not a cure. Endo grows outside of the uterus. So removing the uterus does nothing for your endo. It is not a treatment.
Thank you so much for answering this question. So questions, because they're coming in now, but we'll come back to some questions. Sorry, Madixia, did you want to jump in? Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask, she said, where Odelia was speaking about, she had a hysterectomy. A lot of women are being told by some of the practitioners that are not necessarily up to date with the information that they're going to trick their body into menopause and that's going to cure the endo. But that is not the way this tissue works. It's a hormonal tissue, yes, but it is not the endometrial tissue of the uterus. It is like that L-I-K-E is a big L-I-K-E. So that is why you're going to have persistent symptoms of the tissues wherever they are already deposited. And wherever they are, they will make themselves hurt. All right? So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to move on. Time feels like it's just completely escaped me, but we're going to keep going. So the next question I want to ask, and is about the workplace. So we did some work on fibroids, and when we asked women about their experience of fibroids in the workplace, I have to admit I was shocked. So I'm assuming it's probably going to be the same, but I'm going to ask you guys, about what some of the challenges that women with endometriosis face in the workplace. And we'll start with Madixia. So what are some of the challenges that women experience? And maybe what do you think, what policies could be introduced to sort of address those challenges and ensure that maybe, anyway, let me not preempt, but what are some of the challenges and what sort of policies do you think should be introduced to address some of the issues?
Well, the first challenge is sick leave. 40 days of sick leave, not going and cut it. We get, besides signs and symptoms, Odelia spoke about that at length. So I don't need to go back there. But you see the sick leave, 14 days. When you have the first month of the year, you could exhaust 14 days. Right? So when you tell me that I have 14 days leave for the year, I'm in context of Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know about the rest of the Caribbean, all of the details. But in context of Trinidad and Tobago, we have 14 days sick leave for most of the government workers. Other areas, some of them only have 7, right? They exhausted that in the first month of the year. When they go now to apply for extended sick leave, what will happen? If this sickness is not classified as being on the list of approved illnesses and diseases that could be given extended leave and are entitled to insurance, what's going to happen there? They're not going to have any financial aid given to them during this period of downtime. No money coming in to financially support them while they are down. They have to wait and depend on relatives and friends. So you could imagine the situation. We know the economic times that we are working in and we are living in the Caribbean. Everybody needs a job. So they will fight to go to work while they are sick. So they will be late. They will be leaving early. They will be. I'm saying this because I don't have endo. Let's make it very clear, because some persons might think that I have endo. I do have endo. I support women and their families who have endo. And I understand the struggle from the outside. So I can only talk about what I see. And I can tell you that their experience is a hard one from looking at it, because I know if I am working all the time and I struggle, they are working, their salary is going to be garnished, right? The industrial relations of their companies will be looking at them all the time. So they will always be frustrated and anxious. And that is in addition to the endo frustration and anxiety that comes with the pain. So these are women who, let's put it in a better way, could get a psychotic break anytime. That is how real it is. And as such, we have these type of women struggling to make ends meet, struggling to be productive in a system that is expecting them to produce as everybody else, regardless of their limitations. So we expecting a bit much from them, and our governmental agencies have to be mindful that just as we have cancers that debilitate persons, endometriosis debilitates women and has the ability to collapse a family in a year. Because the amount of money you have to spend for painkillers, the amount of money you have to spend for therapy. Listen, one session at the pelvic massage, if you have to go for that every 2 weeks, say you're going for the pelvic massage, how much weeks we have in a year? 52. So that is 104 sessions for the year. And we're not talking about the times when you have a critical need for it more than every 2 weeks. And you have to pay what, 350, 400 TT and up, right? For your visit. What your salary looking like?
Yeah.
After you stay home so much.
Yeah.
Right? So we need more sick leave for sure. For sure. And we need it to be on that list that is classifying extended sick leave, so that persons can have a financial income. That income while they are sick, because it is justifiable.
Wonderful. I think that's really clear. Very clear. Very, very clear. So I know we have two persons from the Department of Gender Affairs on here. So we might get them to weigh in later on about some of these issues. So Julia, Odelia as well, do you want to jump in about the workplace and how women, the challenges that women face in the workplace? I have to make it a bit quick though. So Julia?
Sure. I don't think I need to expand too much on what Madixia said. Just what has been found also in the spaces I've been in is, unfortunately, and I'm saying it in this setting because I think this is a space in which this change can be made. In the research that I'm doing, particularly with women with these conditions, there is a persistent concern, complaint that when women with endometriosis or chronic pelvic pain are presenting to work and sharing that with supervisors who happen to also be female or women, they're met with disdain and judgment, which is very concerning to me. And it seems as though you wouldn't expect it, obviously, because most women have experienced a period and understand period discomfort. But I think it goes back to the pain stigma and pain minimization, where their supervisors seem to be, especially based on the reports I get, especially harsh on them when they are sharing that they are dealing with pain and they have to call out sick. And so what happens is, to combat that, regardless of the gender of the supervisor, in being more general now, they go to work, but they're not productive. And so that's called presenteeism. And so there's a lot of research that shows that women with endometriosis have so much presenteeism, where they're there just to sit in a chair so that there's no critique. And so no one can be talking about them to say, oh, they're just calling out sick from work. And again, they don't want to use up their sick days for that because they might have a surgery, right? They might have to have some type of intensive procedure that they need those days for. So they have to weigh the pros and the cons. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get muster up all the energy I can get, catch the bus, drive in myself, whatever, but just go sit so that you can't say that I'm not here, which still isn't good, because you are still not being as productive as you would want to be, and you are still putting your body under immense amounts of stress, right? And so it makes recovery and it makes navigating the endometriosis that much harder when you're doing that. So that's just something I wanted to raise in terms of the work that I've been doing and speaking to women and them sharing their concerns about judgment from other women when they're sharing their pain, especially in the workplace.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Odelia, do you want to add anything about the workplace? Because I know the workplace is a huge sort of issue.
It is. I just to reiterate what Julia said, other women can be bullies to women with endo, because it's not your experience. You don't have pain, you don't have nausea, you don't have to go to the doctor often. You think that other women are faking it, or it can be that bad. And so women with endo are sometimes bullied at work by other women, believe it or not. Yes, Bridget, you don't look sick. It's an invisible disease, of course. You can't look at me until I have endo. Especially as women, we've become so good at masking that even when I am in crippling pain, you will never be able to tell that I'm suffering, because I don't want anybody talking about me. I don't want you causing any problems for me on the workplace, and I'm not going to show this. And when Madixia was talking about sick days, I'm here like, is she talking about me? Because I got to the point where I had exhausted all of my sick days, and they started taking it out of my vacation days. And so as a woman with endo, she's talking and I'm like, hey, look me, because this is our daily experience. And if you're talking about economics, we have to even get into the cost of pads and tampons and pain medication and all of that. Why are pads and tampons taxed? These things need to be made more affordable for women. There's still women who are using toilet paper and old pieces of cloth because they're bleeding so heavily they can't afford pads every month. So there's a lot that we need governments to do for us. So I'm hoping that the gender affairs persons that are here can take back our concerns, because we need help.
Write it down.
We need
Write
help.
it down.
Oh,
That's
Write it down.
Saros
Yes.
Hendrickson from.
Yes.
I might get you guys to weigh in very shortly. Wonderful. Okay, so time is a little against us. I'm going to ask one more question about impact, and then we'll kind of move to some solutions. So the care economy. So we know women generally tend to be looking after older parents, children. If they have a child with a disability, they tend to be the ones that are doing all of that caring. So women with endometriosis are probably going to have that responsibility as well. So how might women who are living with endometriosis and they're also in the care economy, either paid or unpaid, how does their condition affect them in these roles, and what systems are needed to kind of support them? So I see Julia, so I'm going to hand over to Julia. Go for it.
This is a question that I've been forever answering. So that's why I'm shaking my head, because women typically are the carers, right? And so, as Odelia alluded to, I'm just going to be, for lack of a better term, I'm just going to suck it up and deal with it. If I am the carer, if I am especially if I'm the main caretaker, right? If I am a single mother, if I'm taking care of my elderly patients, there's no one else that can do it. And so that feeds into what is known, I'm not sure if it's known in the Caribbean, but in the US as the strong Black woman schema, where you are forever the strong person. And regardless of the fact that you have a condition that is debilitating, you still have to be strong because everyone else is depending on you. And what it does, like I mentioned before, is it makes the situation that much more worse for the individual, because then they don't have the support system that they need around them to carry the load. And that's what they need in terms of that support. You need someone else to carry the load. But on the flip side, it's very difficult because when you're vulnerable, there are people that are judging you and minimizing your pain and discriminating against you. And so therefore you're scared to ask for help. You rather just again stick it up and deal with it and deal with the negative responses from people that you think should be there to support you. So I don't have any solutions at this point in time except for, making sure that people are more empathetic. But that requires, again, it goes back to education about endometriosis, education about the impact of endometriosis, recognizing that the pain is real and recognizing that it's a chronic condition. Chronic meaning you have it for life. And so you are always going to be navigating these ebbs and flows, obviously, because there's some people that are literally always in pain daily, but there's some people that have breaks, right? But at the end of the day, you do not know when that pain flare is going to come. You can try your best. You can, eat all the anti-inflammatory foods. You can do all these low impact exercises. You can do everything under the sun that you've been told. But sometimes that pain just comes and it flattens you. And so who's going to be there to help you carry that load when it does? And that comes back to having a community and support system around you that is willing to put aside what they think they know about women's bodies and what they think they know about pain and recognize that this is your experience. Honor it.
Sorry.
And just be there for you. Yeah, it's a very tough question because it's a constant that we keep seeing in our advocacy and I keep seeing in my research.
Wonderful, thank you. So quickly, Odelia and Madixia, do you want to add anything about the care economy? And then we'll try and move on to solutions and then some questions from the audience.
Sure. women do a lot of unpaid labor. Your mothers, your daughters, you have aging parents, you have sisters, you have brothers. Even in church, women do a lot of unpaid labor. And when you're not able to do these things, it's always in the back of your head that you're letting down somebody. And so that's even with you're not able to carry out the task, it's how it's affecting you mentally, that you're letting down somebody, you're not able to fulfill the roles that you're expected to fulfill. And so again, it starts affecting you. You feel less than, you feel unworthy, you feel not loved. And that then spirals into affecting your mental health. And women with endo tend to have higher rates of depression and anxiety and suicidality because of all of this combination of everything we've talked about tonight, the economics of it all, the pain, the suffering that you're experiencing, not being able to work, not being able to fulfill your roles that you think you should be fulfilling as a woman or that society's expectations on you. In terms of solutions to the care economy, again, it goes back to community support. Because if I can't fulfill this role today, is there somebody else who can step in and help me? Why is it always that it has to be the woman who has to do everything? There are men, there are fathers, there are sons, there are brothers, there are community men. And this takes me back to why I always say there needs to be community involvement. Because without it, women will always be by themselves. They will feel alone, they will feel isolated, and they will continue to suffer in silence because they do not have the support that they need.
Yeah, indeed. Madixia, do you want to add anything to the care economy conversation?
But I just wanted to look at a question that was asked. Is endometriosis covered by insurance companies in the region outside of Trinidad and Tobago, where it is not? Many treaty jobs are afforded coverage
go ahead.
with an extra loading based on the risk. Why can't endometriosis be covered based on each individual's risk?
So, Julia, Barbados, is it covered? St. Vincent?
It is. So it is, but it also isn't. So it depends on the insurance company. There's that, and I can't remember which, but it might not necessarily be coded as endometriosis, right? It might be coded as dysmenorrhea. That's when it gets covered. So it's always from what I am aware of, sometimes it's definitely dependent on the insurance company. There's some that just outright do not cover these conditions, full stop. And then there might be an insurance company that might say, well, this is not within our code book, but if you and your medical practitioner work in a space and we can code it as this symptom, this presentation, then it can be covered. So it's not a straightforward answer, unfortunately, in terms of Barbados. I don't know about Odelia.
Yeah, same here. Some insurance companies will not take you if you have endo. I've been turned away, and some will, and they would suggest that the doctors write it as the symptom. So, heavy menstrual bleeding or something, and then they'll be able to cover it based on the symptom that you're having. So it depends on the insurance company. Honestly, there is no clear-cut answer to this one.
Yeah, I think Madixia, we heard about Trinidad, but if you want to recap about Trinidad, I think you talked about it earlier.
NIS, in terms of the national insurance, if there's anything specific for endometriosis there. If somebody has to, you have to code it well. You have to code it well.
Yeah.
Because there's anything specific for the woman. And it comes as though they have to live in a shroud of mystery. And all of that is adding to them not being able to access care properly. Because if it is, they can't come out and say, this is really what is going on with me. But they have to say something else in order to access the care. Not that everything else not happening, they just have to limit it to this in order so that they could get that insurance money. Come on, we could do better.
Mm-hmm.
We could do better for them.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I'm going to lump all the solution questions into one question because we're running out of time. So when it comes to solutions, so we're thinking about policy, we're thinking about treatment, diagnosis, the whole gamut. What do you think are the solutions? Everything we've talked about today, what do you think the policy solutions are? What do you think the healthcare solutions are? Maybe just a particular area that you're particularly concerned about. What do you think some of the solutions are? So we'll start with Odelia. What do you think the solutions are? And we'll also bring in, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, we'll also bring in Saros Hendrickson and Shelly-Ann Hart to maybe respond so that we can have a discussion around policymakers and some of the solutions as well. So Odelia, starting with you, what do you think some of the solutions are to what we've discussed?
We need more resources.
Okay.
Foundation. We need more resources in the Caribbean. We need more doctors trained in endo. We need more specialists. We need more everything, just more resources. Now, I can give an example of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have one gynecological oncologist in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, just one, for a population of 110,000 people.
Oh.
And she has to do everything. Endo, gynecological cancers, everything. But we don't have some of the modern equipment that she trained on and that will be very useful for her here. So depending on where your endo is, we still have to travel to Trinidad or Barbados or Jamaica. And so these smaller countries have very low resources. Overall, the Caribbean has low resources, but imagine a smaller country within the Caribbean. We need more resources. Women need more support. There's no cure for endo, but let's see what we can do to support our women. Let's see what resources we can make available. We need the taxes gone off of period products. I will always advocate for that. I will advocate for more sick days given to women. And because it's not just endo, there's fibroids, there's adeno, there's PCOS, there's so many conditions that affect women. I will advocate for more sick days so that women who just cannot make it out of bed, who are bleeding their life away, who have fatigue, who have brain fog, who just can't function. What is the point of having somebody turning up to work for the sake of going to work, being in the building, but they can't produce? Yeah. To me, that makes no sense.
Right.
We need more work from home options in the Caribbean. Why is it in this modern day and age that I have to go in an office to sit down at a computer and I can sit down at the computer in my house and do the same amount of work? I don't get it. We really need to get with the modern times here. And as a psychologist, I will always advocate for mental health support for all women, especially women with endo. I have a therapist. Best money I have ever spent, because living with endo really can negatively impact your mental health. And I am at a place where I can afford to pay it out of pocket, but not all women can afford to do that. So that's another resource that I think is needed. Make it more accessible to more women so that they can get that support. Again, equipment, human resources, take off the tax off the products them give it, please. And community support. We have a good thing going with the NGOs among in the Caribbean countries. We work together well, we support each other, and I would just like to see that continue to grow and maybe expand to other Caribbean countries so that we can continue to raise awareness, because knowledge is power. I can't know that something is wrong if I don't know there's a word for it. Like, you know something is wrong, but you don't know what the word is for what you're experiencing. And so with education will come the language to explain and describe what you're experiencing and be able to get the help that you need.
Wonderful, wonderful. Madixia, any solutions? Anything you want to add?
I think she covered everything that I was thinking about.
Wonderful.
I looked at it as the point of view of holistic care. Holistic care is what is needed. So when a woman becomes diagnosed, the support systems required, she is streamlined to those support systems. She has accessibility to get those services. She doesn't have to try and find it, source it, pay for it. No. She's diagnosed with it, just like how you would have a patient who is diagnosed with HIV. They are streamlined to medication and support services. It is the same thing that we should be affording women and girls who are diagnosed with endometriosis. Identify, because they need holistic care. They need dietary support. They need surgical support. They need medical support. They need gynecological support. They need psychological support. And if it is that the deposit is growing somewhere in the lungs, they need multidisciplinary surgical support.
Mm.
You understand? So there are so much needs that these women have. And you see them, look at Odelia. She looking like if she have any endo. Eh? Tell me, look at Miss Julia. Look at Julia. When you look at Julia, you see endo on her head? So that's what I'm saying. They are fighting a battle and they are fighting it well. It is up to us now, the rest of the population, to give them the support that they need. They need it. And if it is, we cannot provide them with the basic resources. Let's try something. Not just, okay, you go to a health facility and you have pain and they give you something that they give to everybody. Let's do an assessment for the pain. Let's understand that, yes, she was diagnosed with endometriosis before. Okay, so she will need specific assessment for pain and whatnot. So you know that you're running a specific algorithm looking at how you're going to care for this person. It would not be the same as anybody else that walks in the door. So these are the things that we need to do. We need to have a specific type of care for these women, just as we would, as I said, HIV have a care, you know. They come to the door, they are diagnosed, and a specific type of care is given to them, and algorithm is followed. This is what we need. We need specialized care, multidisciplinary, multisectoral care for these women. That is what I think it is.
Wonderful, thank you. And then Julia, I might ask you to touch on research. In terms of solutions, so we know that funding and research on endometriosis in the Caribbean is often lacking. So what needs to change to ensure that we can have more funding dedicated to endometriosis? But the key thing is funding. So where can this funding come from, or where should it come from? So we'll leave the kind of research solutions, because I know you're doing a lot of research, and any other solution you'd like to address.
Right. Yeah, so I was gonna say everything that Odelia and Madixia said is right, but I would also say we want to make sure that it's context and culturally specific to us. And that's where the research comes in. We need to have community engaged, community-centered research with the women with endometriosis as part of the research team, right? Because I'm a strong believer of nothing about us without us. And so it's important to center them in, not just ask some questions and take the information, like actually have that. So I am a person with endometriosis doing research on people with endometriosis, including other people with endometriosis in that research, because we are very aware of our experiences, but there's also diversity in those experiences. And so you cannot speak for everyone within this realm. But the research, both qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods, the whole gamut of research to really get the numbers, especially for the policy people, you need those hard figures, those statistical, things. You need to get those level of significance for them to understand there. But you also need to have that feeling aspect, that qualitative research, for people that really understand when you're telling stories about how people are navigating endometriosis. I think it's great that we are calling for the resources, and we really need to get the resources immediately, but we want to make sure the resources match the context and match the people. In terms of funding, that's an awesome question. Because I want to be transparent. For me, I'm able to do the research through my PhD, and so I'm not currently in Barbados. But I did do research in Barbados, but it was unfunded. And so sometimes you just have to step out. And your resources could be your network. And so use the network of the people that are willing to support you to do the research. I feel like most of us have some sort of association with UE or some UE campus, and make sure like you can connect into them, because UE is our research institute within the English speaking Caribbean. And so that's how I started out doing research in endometriosis. I have a co-researcher who is at the UE, and so after that, when I came and did my PhD, I then was very insistent to say, I want to do research back in Barbados. I want to do research back in the Caribbean. And so I was able to share that I've done that and leverage that to bring research back to the region. With the funding, I think it's a catch-22 or a chicken and egg situation, because obviously the people that you're asking for funding might want to get an idea of what you can do, but you can't do it without the money. And so that's why I said sometimes it might be a case of you just stepping out of that space and doing the research on your own, and then sharing that with them for them to become more interested and invest in you and your work. So I'm thinking like your governments. You also have several funding institutes globally. And they're also women's health entities that fund this type of research, particularly in um, areas like the Caribbean, which are considered underserved in terms of research. So with research, it really is about expanding your network outside of the Caribbean, because all intents and purposes, the Caribbean, we do have really good researchers, but it is not as robust as it is like internationally. So if you can partner with international researchers and leverage that relationship and bring them in and have them support you and not take over the research, it's very important for them to be supportive and allies and not try to own the research. That I think is a way to start to generate the answers to the questions that we have about endometriosis and all of these other conditions as well, that affect the women in our context, because we have to think about the impacts of colonialism, we have to think about the impact of the patriarchy, we have to think about the impacts of being in these intersectional spaces, as being Black women in the Caribbean, which are typically not identities that have been researched, and really be able to center that in the work, so that then when you get the research, it informs the resources, it informs the type of multidisciplinary team that is needed for women. So it really does, it's interconnected. But I also know research is very slow going. So it's important to work internationally as well. And I know Odelia and she as Moses is doing it. I think TTTA is doing it. We do it in Barbados, where we really reach out to our partners in the US, in Canada, in Europe, right? And leverage their resources that we can then bring back and better support our community until we can do it ourselves with, the research supporting us. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
But
Wonderful.
it's okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to go over time a little bit if people don't mind, maybe like 10 minutes. But I know Odelia, I think you have to leave like soon. Yeah, so if you want to give like just a short kind of last words, and then I will bring in, if they don't mind, I'll bring in the policymakers, then we'll go to some questions, then we'll wrap up.
Yes, sorry about that. I have another session at 7:30. Just my last words as a woman with endo, advocating for others with endo. I want to encourage women that it's hard. Living with endo is not a walk in the park. It's a very hard experience, and I don't want that to be minimized or cast aside. It is very hard, and we need all of the support that we can get. And while we are waiting for research and funding and all of these things to come, let's see what we can do as individuals and as communities to empower ourselves and to empower each other. And together, we have more of a voice to then start advocating for the resources and the things that we need. And I know funding is a little ticklish right now with a lot of agencies losing funding, but let's see what we can do with what we have and do what we can. That's basically what we need to do. We have to do what we can with what we have and try and leverage our networks to help us. Because we can't do it alone. We just definitely can't. And just, if there's any woman with endo listening here, you are not alone. You're not the only person with endo, even though some days you feel like you are. You are not alone. And there are associations in almost all of the countries that you can reach out to for support, because sometimes you just want somebody to talk to, somebody who will understand your experience and be able to say, yeah, I get you. I understand you. And somebody who's not going to minimize what you're going through. So if it is that you need to reach out for support or to ask a question, please do so. Don't suffer in silence. I told my friends I am taking off my strong Black woman cape for 2025. Soft life me, please. 2025, that has been my motto. This strong Black woman cape where everybody thinks that I'm okay all the time. I'm done with that. Today I'm not okay, and you're going to know I'm not okay. Soft life me going forward. So whatever it is that you need to do to take care of yourself, do that. And I am hopeful that the gender affairs administrators that are here are really listening to the experiences of the person, and she holds up her notes, are really listening to our experiences, because we need support from governments. It's expensive to be a woman with endo, and that's the honest truth. We need a lot of supplies, we need medications, we need fertility treatments. There's so many things that we need that we just can't afford, because so much of our money goes back into this disease. And so whatever it is that governments can do to support us, we would greatly appreciate it. And to our support systems, I see a few men are here. Continue to support. The more that you understand and learn, not just the general things about endo, but how endo affects the person that is in your life, because we are all different. How it affects me will be different to how it affects Julia. So learn from that person, sit with them, talk with them, be open to listening and ask questions. You may not be ready or willing to hear the answer, but ask them, how can I support you? What do you need from me? Because what you think you're giving may not be what they need from you. So we need to encourage communication. And so I think that's where I would like to leave it for tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Odelia. Let's give her a round of applause.
A
round of applause and say thank you so much for your contributions. It's been a great having you as part of the panel. It's been really interesting. And I know you have another event like right now. Yes. So we hope that goes well, and hopefully some of us will also jump over to that as well. So,
yes, please. So those who can, right after this, we are doing diaphragmatic endo tonight. That's the session we're going to have. I'm talking about endo on the diaphragm. So if you're interested, you can go over to our Facebook page. We'll be live streaming it there. So good night, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so I'm now going to put our policymakers, if they're comfortable, on the spot a little bit. So based on everything that you've heard tonight, I just wondered if Saros, if you wanted to just make any comments, and also the same to Shelley and Hart.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for sharing all the information with us. They basically said everything that I wanted to address when it comes to policy making. I want to, really drive um, when she says nothing about us without us. So those who are affected must own the policy. They must own the policy. And we have to call endometriosis what it is in a policy. You can't put a code to it. You can't say it's dysmenorrhea. Say what it is. For us to do that, and we understand that, then it treats what should be treated, right? It should be inclusive. It should be inclusive. You call it what it is, you state what it is, you state what the effects are, you state those who are affected, and it gives those legislatures an understanding of the impact it has, not just on the person, but on the collective. And from the conversations, we know that, yes, women, they lead the care economy, they lead homes, they lead communities, they lead businesses, they lead offices. And if you're living with this debilitating condition, you can't function and you can't produce as well as you should. So within the policy, it should highlight all of that if you really need to have that change. And that change has to be systemic. It has to be systemic, it has to be in your face, and it requires work. Right. So my hope, my sincere hope is after this webinar, we collect all our notes and then we begin to do the groundwork in preparing these policies.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that would be great. I mean, whatever is needed in terms of consultation, information, I am sure we will all be willing to contribute to that process. So,
one point though, when it comes to workplace support, the point about sick leave, that is, how many sick leave can you take? You can't take. I mean, here we have what? We have 6 days per year, and your sick leave, 2 weeks? 2 weeks sick leave, right? And if you're having this condition every month where you're sick, how much more can you? So we have to have discussion about disability benefits now, or give the option, like our colleague said, to work remotely. That option should be given, right? So flexible work hours. So I think when you drive these policies within legislation, it forces companies and organizations to create their own regulations within their offices to support all workers for effective endometriosis. Yep.
Great. So, Ms. Shelley-Ann Hart, any thoughts, any comments, any insight based on what you've heard today?
Yes, similar to Saros, the panel covered a lot of my recommendations I was going to make. But as a policymaker, I would say we could look towards developing guidelines and framework for support in the workplace, in the education system, etc., so that these organizations would be clear in their mind what is expected, what is needed, and what support they can give. We could look at introducing things like legal protection and benefits, which is coverage or solutions or recommendations that the panel propose. So you want to look at, as they say, in terms of the benefits, what you want to do is encourage companies to have workplace policies, maybe give private sector companies tax breaks, incentives for having policies that support women's sexual and reproductive health conditions such as endometriosis, heavy menstruation, menopause, etc. Looking at legal protection to put in place policies to guard against discrimination or to treat with it if it happens. As Saros and the others mentioned, flexible working hours, special medical leave, and this is for those who might be so intense that they are unable to work. So not just sick leave as in the 14 days that occurs in Trinidad, but special leave and accommodations for those who are experiencing severe pain and cannot function. Maybe a grant, we're talking about supporting research, as Julia said. That's support for research and funding in terms of research, not only research, but for other care protections. We need to collaborate, we need to partner, not only across government, but across government, private sector, and civil society. We need that multi-sectoral approach. We also need to network and partner with developmental partners across the region and internationally. So organizations such as UN Women, UNFPA, IDB, we can approach those as a region to do projects. These organizations already work in other areas. They work in areas of gender-based violence. They work in areas of sexual and reproductive health. So we can bring this issue to them, and it is already on the global focus, much less or much attention because other matters. So we can raise the awareness across the region. We can join our voices. And I know there was a call for removing of taxes on period products. We have also been asking for that in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, our Minister Ayanna Webster-Roy, Minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs under the Office of the Prime Minister, would have had discussions with the Prime Minister as well as the Minister of Finance about removing taxes on period products. She has also had discussions with the Minister of Education for the provision of period products free in schools. So those are some of the initiatives we are taking from Gender Affairs. We are working, so we would love to partner with not only across the region, but of course our own organization here with Madixia. So, we will contact her after to partner and go forward and do the awareness. And it's just more than awareness and sensitization, but it is getting people to change their behavior. And as we say, we need men and boys in the fight. So those days that women with endo don't feel well, no, I myself don't have endo, but I suffer from fibroids. I have fibroids, so I have extreme pain and very heavy bleeding. So I too know what it is to have crippling pain on some days, and you can't focus, you have the brain fog, you have all of that. So we need men and boys along with us to understand what women go through when it relates to these conditions and provide that support. So providing basic skills for men and boys in terms of helping them care for the home and family, cooking skills, all those things, sensitization. We need to wrap it. It's not a separate issue. It's all encompassing. So if it is a woman with endo on a particular day can't get up to cook or make a cup of tea or clean the house, there's somebody who can step in if there's meals around. We're talking about, well, I said incentive for private sector and state collaboration and encourage workplace health and education policies. So that's just a few I would say that I would recommend, and the Gender Affairs Trinidad and Tobago is willing to partner with not only national agencies, but those across the region and our gender affairs departments across the region as well to address the issue. So please reach out to us. We can do more of this and we could get it on global attention, high focused.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that is what we like to hear, the willingness to collaborate of a policymaker with a civil society organization. So wonderful. And thank you for all your input. Renelle White would like to add. So over to you. If you want to turn on your, yeah, there we go.
Yes. Hi, you all. It was a really great session. I just wanted to add just 1 minute, one story and one quick comment. In addition to what Ms. Hart would have presented to you all. Like I said before, I also work alongside her as the Assistant Director of the Gender Affairs Division in Trinidad. And together with everything that she presented and all these solutions, so to say, I think we need to keep in mind that this is why it is so important for us to have women at decision-making levels. This is why we need to share the boardroom, so to say, because a woman would understand another woman's experience. Now, yes, we know that sometimes they may, like another presenter said, they may shame others, they may not believe them and so on. But we also need to keep in mind that we have to transform the culture of misogyny and sexism together with all the policies and decision-making on the government on high levels. Because if the culture doesn't change, we could have all the policies, all the things written, into laws and so on, and the mindset of the population will not change, right? So it's very important to have women at the head so they could actually make better decisions that would include women's specific needs. So we could not only have gender equality, but we could have gender equity in a move to achieve equality. So that's one. Also, I just wanted to share a quick story. So Saturday, I went to the mall, and there was a little activity going on where it was all about period initiatives and ending period poverty and so on. And it was a radio station that put it on, and they had guys on stage with period simulators, right, attached to them, so they could better understand period pain and whatnot. And it was all fun and jokes and whatnot. But some guys was like, oh, I could manage this. What's the big deal? I could go make a sandwich and cook and clean the house while experiencing this. I don't understand what's the big deal. And it really cemented even more by hearing those comments that we don't need to prove to men what we experience as women, because there's also an underlying misogynistic basis to that women exaggerate, they lie, they just saying things so you treat them nicely or better, or to escape chores and responsibilities. So that was just a very real life example, and it was so funny. And I was appalled to hear these men go up there and say, what's the big deal? Yeah, send it up a little higher. I'm not feeling nothing. Right? Because what that does, it minimizes women's experiences, and they are not in women's bodies to be able to understand that with menstruation or endometriosis in this case, it might not just be a physical pain in your lower abdomen, it might be back, headaches, fatigue, mental distress, psychological distress, being emotional, feeling depressed, even feeling anxieties and so on, right? So all things need to be considered, and we do not need to prove to men what we experience and who we are and what we are in this world. So that's just a plug, a little anecdote, and a call for us as women who are at decision-making policy levels to make sure and consider the needs of our fellow women in sisterhood and in solidarity.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. So I'm just quickly looking through, thank you for your contribution. Appreciate it so much. So I'm just quickly looking through the questions and comments just to make sure that we get to some of these. So some comments are things like, if endometriosis affects mental health, are specialists referring people to psychologists? So I don't know if you all want to comment on that, if that really happens. How can we start the conversation with local insurance companies has come up. And anything else that's come up, that we need to really write to CARICOM as a regional group and ask for the opportunity to present the case of endometriosis in the region. That's come up. I think those are the three things that have come up. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, and then we'll wrap up on any of those.
Let me go to the
I could comment on the mental health. Sorry. I was saying I could comment on the mental health question, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've actually done research and I'm doing research on endometriosis and mental health. And yes, the research I've done, and there's also research I've read where there is a high association of endometriosis and depression and endometriosis and anxiety. There's also the stigma. So there's that relationship with being stigmatized, experiencing stigma and then internalizing that stigma, and then that also leading into the experiences of depression and depressive symptoms. And in the research I've done, again, the caveat is this research was done in the USA in college populations and then in Black populations. It tends to present more in vulnerable populations. So people that have already been marginalized, there are higher levels of stigma, and the association with depression seems to be more. I don't know if that's the right word to use in statistical analysis, but it seems to be there is that association. And I'm currently also investigating that in my research home in Barbados. So we will see. But so far internationally, that is the case. So I would be surprised if it wasn't the case for us in Barbados and then the wider Caribbean. In terms of connecting into care, that unfortunately doesn't seem to be happening as regularly as it should be. but we have been, in our work in Barbados, we really have been advocating for that multidisciplinary approach. And we do know that there are some endometriosis specialists in Barbados that do have therapists on their staff to support their patients throughout the process, but that's not necessarily what happens in the public sector. As you feel when you go to the private sector, that's a whole other conversation about public versus private. But it does happen, but not as broadly as we think it should.
Okay, thanks so much, Julia. So Madixia, do you want to take any of the others? There was something about insurance and then how to start the conversation with the insurance
I know
industry.
you have addressed the matter with the insurance.
Okay.
In terms of the insurance companies, it is individualized according to the company. Each company has their own bylaws and policies, and they will cover accordingly what they deem fit. My suggestion is that persons consider what they want from the policy. And if it is that putting the disease endometriosis is what is the issue, but you can get coverage for some of the symptoms and you want to go that way, you can. All right. So that is a window of opportunity for you in terms of using the symptoms instead of the umbrella but the disease as the umbrella for all the symptoms that you can experience. If that is the case, you can go ahead apply using those symptoms. And there was another question.
Yeah, I think it was about CARICOM.
To say just one more thing. Pertaining to Trinidad and Tobago, we do referrals. I must say we have stress clinics. So women who need to be referred can be referred. No, they can also go in walking off the street for themselves. So if they are seeing a private practitioner who hasn't referred them, but they feel the need to access psychological aid, they can go to one of the stress clinics in the different areas and access that care. In terms of the CARICOM question now, how do we put forth a case? Well, we can join our hands together. We can. I mean, the politicians can do it properly all the time, but we can. Where there's a will, there's a way. We put our heads together. We come up with our proposals to the CARICOM leaders, and we write to them and wait for the response. So it is not impossible.
Yeah, I think that's doable. I think some kind of policy brief, I think that's doable. So that could be something that we consider as civil society. So we are over time, 20 minutes over time. Apologies, but the conversation was going so well. I didn't really want to interrupt the flow. So we're going to wrap up now. And I would just really like to say thank you to everybody that's participated in this panel discussion. And so firstly, I'd just like to thank Saros Hendrickson, who's the Director of the Department of Gender Affairs in Nevis, both for giving remarks, but also for partnering with us. She's now been a long-standing partner with Lake Health and Wellbeing over the past 2 years. We've been working together on various different issues, and it's just a pleasure to work with Ms. Hendrickson and her team. So I would like to say thank you so much, Ms. Hendrickson, for partnering with us for this event, but also for other issues that we've worked with you on. I'd like to thank Ms. Shelley-Ann Hart, the Director of Gender Affairs Bureau, Trinidad and Tobago, for joining this session and for giving her remarks and also for giving a response, which was really very insightful and also really encouraging, and also for offering to partner with the Trinidad and Tobago Endometriosis Association. We also thank her colleague, I think it was Renelle Williams, who also provided some insights and shared a story there. So we appreciate your input. Of course, we'd like to thank our fantastic panelists, Julia Mandeville, Odelia Thomas, Madixia Broomes for this wonderful discussion. I think it was an excellent conversation. We appreciate all the work that you're doing in your respective countries to support women living with endometriosis. We appreciate your expertise, your input, your openness, sharing your stories really with us today. So thank you so much. We are so appreciative of your time, very generous with your time as well. Also like to thank everybody that's joined us today. I know we've gone a bit over time, so apologies if that's inconvenienced you in any way. But thank you so much for your questions and for your attention. We really appreciate.
I would like 1 minute, well,
yes.
5 seconds. I would like to just, I saw my president.
Okay, yes, I saw. Oh, yes, sorry, apologies, Amber.
This Amber Grant, and I saw other members of the TTEA, Miss Winter. I saw Miss Bridget Winter, and somebody else I saw as well. Oh, I can't find Lisa Dickey. Yes, Lisa Dickey is also here. So I just want to say thank you guys for giving that support. And without leadership, we can't go anywhere. So we have good leaders, and we all will come together, and I am sure that something good has to happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Saros, I think you want to say something. You turned on your video, so did you want to say some last words?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Yes, I look forward to work. I look forward to working now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Julia, if you want to say any last quick words, and then we will call it a night.
I want to thank you, Abby. Thank you. Thanks to League for this convening, for bringing us all together. I think this was a much needed continuation of the conversations we've been having previously, but I think really focusing in on that policy aspect, I think is really fundamental for that change that we so desperately need. So thank you. Thank you to my fellow panelists. Thank you to the respective gender affairs bureaus and departments for your support, and just always happy to be here. So thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So the session was recorded, so we will share the recording with you so that you can refer to it later on. If you have any questions that come up after the session, feel free to email us, and then we'll put that question to the appropriate person and send you an email response back. But thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a good night. So take care. Bye-bye.